Hello, this is Craig with Red Chip Companies. Thank you for joining today's event with Enlivex Therapeutics, which trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker ENLV. With us today, we have Oren Hershkovitz, Chief Executive Officer of Enlivex. We will begin with a presentation in a moment, and then we'll open the event to your questions. You may submit your question at any time. Click the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window. Before we begin, please allow me to read the safe harbor statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical facts should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. I now turn the webinar over to Oren. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Greg. Hi, everyone. I'm extremely excited today since we're going to provide some, put this on mute so nobody interrupt us. So extremely excited today. Thank you everyone for joining. It's actually an update on our recent press release about the completion of the recruitment for the patients in the osteoarthritis study. We want to talk about this, and actually that will be the focus of this presentation, this webinar. I'll start with a quick, intro for those who are less familiar with Enlivex and really the modality, the concept, where we are, where we're heading, and so on. And then we're going to take a little bit more deeper dive into the data we've announced from the phase 1 part of that osteoarthritis study, but also the recent announcement about completion of the recruitment, and then looking a little bit ahead and where we're heading with that. So let's just start talking about Enlivex. So to those of you who are not familiar with me, I'm the CEO of Enlivex. I've been in the company for almost 6 years, vast experience in drug development. My previous company, we actually developed a drug that was a long-acting growth hormone. It eventually was licensed by Pfizer, worked with them for a few years, the late-stage development, and that drug was approved to date, commercialized in more than 40 countries by Pfizer. It's called Ngenla. It's a long-acting growth hormone. So, a lot of experience both from the business side and Enlivex, and both from the development side. Let's talk about Enlivex. So Enlivex is a cell therapy company, but it's a really unique cell therapy company in the sense that we're not doing the classical cell therapy, but we're actually doing developing a complete new modality in treating inflammatory diseases. We do that by targeting unique cells called macrophages. We know how to modulate, how to reprogram those cells. And by doing that, we are trying to treat in a completely paradigm shift the inflammatory, chronic, and acute inflammatory diseases. The novel approach relies on the fact that we can use actually allogeneic cells, which means we don't match, we don't tailor. It's an off-the-shelf drug, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We're targeting substantial markets with unmet medical needs, with a very cost-effective, as I started to say, cell therapy, a very cost-effective in the sense that we have a very simple manufacturing process, very low cost, very easy to manufacture. And eventually it's a drug that the physician is just throwing and injecting to the patient. So a little bit about the technology, what are macrophages, how do we modulate them, and why this is so important and really a paradigm shift. So macrophages are, fascinating immune cells that can become pro-inflammatory cells, or can become more pro-resolution, pro-homeostatic cells. So it depends on the signals that they pick up from the environment. And in many diseases, actually, they play a role in promoting inflammation. Why is that? Well, they have, as I said before, they have the capability and the plasticity to become cells that promote inflammation. In many cases, that's what needs to be done. But in certain diseases like osteoarthritis and others, they continue to promote inflammation and actually become part of the pathophysiology of the disease. In those diseases, we want to reprogram them and to shift their activity into more pro-resolution. So by doing that, they actually know how to calm down the entire immune system in an holistic way. So this is really a completely new modality. Nobody else is doing that. Now, how do we modulate them? That's the fascinating part. We actually rely on a naturally occurring process. It's not something we invented. It's something that is occurs in each and everyone who listens and other who don't didn't join us today. On a regular basis, we have cells that are dying. Those are called apoptotic cells. It's a normal thing, right? We need to renew our cells all the time. So when they die, somebody needs to clear them out from the system, and that someone is a macrophage, that immune cells that I was talking about. The macrophage know how to identify dying cell, and as long as it's a normal dying cell, he will bind to it, engulf it, and when it's a normal dying cell, he actually become kind of a silent macrophage because he doesn't want to induce inflammation, right? So that's a naturally occurring process that our founder, Professor Lomoval, discovered, and that led to the thinking that we can actually utilize that concept in order to treat inflammatory diseases where macrophages promote that inflammation. We can use normal dying cell to feed those macrophages. And when they engulf our dying cell, they go through this modulation that they go every time they eat a normal dying cell, a normal apoptotic cell. And then they shift into a pro-resolution cells and they actually take the entire immune system with them into that path. So that's the idea behind what we do, which is really very, very exciting and very, very different. And this is how we do it, right? So this is Allocetra. That's the name of the platform, off-the-shelf therapy that designed to restore macrophage homeostasis and rebalance the immune system. The way we manufacture this is really, really simple. It took 3 years to develop, but it's really, really simple. We collect cells from healthy donors. We take them through our process, which basically exposes the condition that induces this apoptosis. The minute that happens, we have a cell, as you can see here, that express an eat me signal, which is identified by the patient macrophages. And then we change formulation, we freeze the cell, and they're ready to be injected. It's as simple as that. It takes less than a day, and it's a very cost-effective technology. How do we apply it? Well, we have a patient here that either can have a systemic inflammation or a local inflammation, but in any case, he has a very active macrophage that we want to calm down. What we do is we inject Allocetra. Let's take this example here directly into the knee. And when we inject Allocetra into the knee, we actually expose those patients to Allocetra and their macrophage interact with our cells. They engulf the Allocetra cells, become more relaxed, pro-homeostatic, anti-inflammatory macrophage, drive the immune system in that direction, and that provide resolution for those patients. And once that happens, once we take the inflammation down, that results in relief in pain, in many other symptoms and relief of symptoms that we'll talk about in osteoarthritis specific. So that's in kind of a quickly go through the technology. Um, for those of you who are maybe I should have mentioned that in the beginning, we're traded on the Nasdaq and the TASE. Um, the ticker is ENLV. So that's the pipeline that we have currently, the clinical pipeline. We're a clinical stage company. There's a lot of patients that were exposed already to Allocetra, either systemically or locally. So from a safety perspective, we have a really robust data that suggests that there's really a favorable safety profile. Again, this is not a classical cell therapy over injecting our dying cells. So we don't expect, and the data support a very favorable safety profile. We have several studies that are ongoing. The sepsis phase 2 study that was completed, 1 year follow-up was completed. The moderate knee osteoarthritis that I will focus today, end-stage knee osteoarthritis that I'll provide a quick update for the other studies as well, basal thumb osteoarthritis, psoriatic arthritis phase 1, and the TMJ um, osteoarthritis, the jaw joint that we've also and then initiated this year, and I'll talk a little bit about it. So, as I said, the focus will be osteoarthritis. So, just setting the stage with what is osteoarthritis? Osteoarthritis is a chronic, life debilitating arthritis disease that is manifested in cartilage damage, cartilage degradation, abnormal remodeling of the bone in the joint. But the most important component that we're targeting is actually the inflammation. The inflammation that occurs in the synovium. Now, in osteoarthritis, it's not a very uh, not a very strong inflammation. It's a what we call low-grade inflammation. But nevertheless, this inflammation play a pivotal role, not just in the damage that occurs to the bone, but also in the pain itself. Now, osteoarthritis eventually leads to really poor life quality. Those patients are suffering from pain. It limits their daily activities, climbing stairs, walking. They're pretty miserable and desperate, and they are looking for good solutions to help them out because currently what we have is really limited effective drugs. Mostly, we're talking about lifestyle changes and pain relief medication. Eventually, those patients find themselves doing a knee replacement surgery, which is underperforming. For some, it works pretty well, but for many, it doesn't. And it's a very invasive procedure, as we know. And as such, we're looking for new therapies that can provide relief and resolution for those patients. The market, as I said, is really substantial. We're talking about today about estimated $7 billion market size, expected to grow. We're getting older, we're more obese, and eventually that's reflected in a gradual increase in the osteoarthritis prevalence. And we're talking about numbers that are really every time I say them, that strikes me. It's we're talking about something like 10, even 20% of the adults in the US that are have osteoarthritis in some joint and at some level, but we're talking about 14 million adults in the US suffering from knee osteoarthritis. So as you can see, this is a really huge unmet medical condition, and it's considered by the FDA as a serious condition because it's so prevalent, because it's such a life debilitating disease. Why Allocetra is relevant here, right? So the answer to that question relies on the fact that our understanding in the past 10 years, we used to think this is a weird tear disease, but it's not. There are still many patients and many even physicians that have this misconcept. But we know today that actually we're talking about a low-grade inflammation triggered and sustained, maintained by pro-inflammatory macrophages. It's a low-grade inflammation. The inflammation itself actually results in additional cartilage degradation that promotes an additional inflammation, recruiting additional macrophages, becoming pro-inflammatory, again leading to cartilage degradation. It's a slow and progressive process that eventually a lot of the pain comes from the inflammation itself. It not necessarily, and definitely for most patients, the bone over bone, uh, you know, mechanical pain. We're talking about mostly inflammation, and the evidence for that is that even if we can grow, and there were some studies that were very successful in growing cartilage, they didn't result in pain relief. And FDA expect us to demonstrate a substantial pain relief even if the direct mechanism of action of the drug is not to relieve pain, but actually to reduce inflammation, eventually that leads to pain relief. And that's what the FDA expects, FDA and EMA as well. So let's go through the several studies that are ongoing and just provide a brief update. So we have the end stage neosteoarthritis. For those of you who follow, we know that you know that last year we provided an update interim analysis that demonstrated in the first 9 patients a very substantial pain relief, 50% pain drop. 2 patients out of 9 had completely pain relief. Only 1 out of 9 patients continued to knee replacement surgery. Again, those are an end stage patient, which means that our patients that really at the end of the most progressive stage of their disease, they don't have or barely have any cartilage. They have a mechanical bone over bone pain. So we actually didn't expect, a dramatic pain relief in this population was more to generate safety data, but we did see that. So that was very, very exciting for us. And I think that was the first hint that we're heading into the right direction. Uh, this study now is still ongoing. We have 80 patients now, and probably will be able to provide an additional update in the coming months for the data from this study. The second study is actually in basal thumb osteoarthritis. In this case, we're talking about this joint over here, and it's the third most common. Hand is the third most common joint um, that suffers from osteoarthritis. And again, those people they don't have any effective therapy. So they're suffering, and this is their hand in this case. They're very limited in what they can do because of the pain. Um, and eventually, we started a study that consists of 2 phases. The first one is kind of a safety run-in, and the second one is a randomized controlled part. So the safety running, we actually have now 16. This is a type of, we have 16 patients that were enrolled to that study, and we're planning to provide an update on the data, up to 6 months data, by June this year. And we already commenced the randomized part of that study. We've completed the first part. It was there was a safety committee that confirmed that we can move to the. We had a safety overlook that confirmed we can move to the next study, and that's something we're currently running. And again, we'll provide an update on this study. It's ongoing very well, and we're really excited to see the data and to share that with you soon. We have an open study in psoriatic arthritis. We've announced the recruitment of the first patient. We're still recruiting additional patients to the study. We advanced in the studies, it's a phase 1 type of study, mostly for safety, but also to allow us to evaluate the potential efficacy for patients with psoriatic arthritis that are not responding well to other drugs, and that's ongoing. Same from the TMJ osteoarthritis that I mentioned. Study is ongoing. It's progressing well. We've dosed the first patient. We're following this patient, and additional patients are um, on the way. And once we have an update on the study, we'll provide data we'll share the data with you. Okay, so let's talk about the moderate knee osteoarthritis. That's really the objective of this webinar was to share the status of this study. We're really excited about where we are and where we're heading, and I'll share with you a little bit why. So the study is targeting patient that we call moderate to severe knee osteoarthritis patient. This is the largest segment of symptomatic osteoarthritis patient, right? So people with grade 2 and grade 3 are the patients that have a progressive disease. It's not an end stage yet, but they are suffering from pain, from poor quality of life. They're very limited in their activity, some are more and some are less, but overall, they have a very debilitating state that leads to the fact that it's painful to walk, it's definitely painful to climb stairs. It's really most of the patients that we're targeting in osteoarthritis are this type of population. Now we started studying kind of a safety run-in. We dose escalate the Allocetra doses from low dose to a higher dose, and eventually, once we've completed that part, there was an independent safety committee reviewing the data, and they didn't find any safety signal and recommended to move to the randomized part. And actually, since we evaluated several doses and there were no differences in terms of safety, they recommended that we can continue with the highest dose tested, and that's exactly what we did. So we started the randomized, controlled, double-blind phase two part of the study. We've injected Allocetra for more eventually than 130 patients, either in a randomized and blinded manner. So actually, it means that half received Allocetra and half received placebo. And then we are following them for up to 12 months. And we just announced the completion of the recruitment of all patients to this part of the study, right? And which means that we are well on track to see the 3 months readout, to receive the 3 months readout from this study by August this year. So very, very close and just around the corner. Now, the primary is obviously safety and tolerability, but also we're doing secondary prime key assessment of the efficacy of the drug, of course, and that's reflected in assessing pain and function, but also additional exploratory assessment that's related to imaging that I'll talk a little about to understand the changes in the inflammation within the joint, within the synovium. Let's talk about the result that we've announced about 2 months ago that includes the interim data for the first 12 patients in this part of the study, right? In the phase one part of the study. It's an open label, right? That's the reason we could look at the data and share that with you, as opposed to the second part of the study where we are blinded. So what I'm presenting here is 3 and 6 months data post-injection on the first 12 patients. And there are a couple of exciting results here. First of all, we see a dramatic pain drop, right? Whether we assess that in an NRS, which means that that's a numerical rating scale between 0 to 10, right? So patients are reporting daily over a week, and we're averaging their pain report. We do that at baseline, and we do that at 3 months and 6 months, and then eventually 12 months. Now, that's an average weekly pain report. That's one way to do it. Another way, which is kind of the validated and an additional acceptable way to assess pain, is by filling in a questionnaire called WOMAC. Patients are coming into the clinical side and they're filling that questionnaire. It's a validated questionnaire. It says pain, as you can see here on the right-hand side. It says pain, function, and stiffness. And what we're presenting here is in dark blue, that's the 3 months data, and light blue, that's the 6 months data. So first of all, we see a substantial, statistically significant pain reduction, whether it's by the weekly average pain or the WOMAC validated pain assessment of function. We see a 50%, both the 3 months and 6 months, and both assessment of pain are aligned. So this is really, it's not just substantial, it's durable, it's aligned between the different assessments. It's a really promising data for us and exciting one. On top of that, we see an improvement. It's a little bit misleading here because we see it as a change from baseline, like 46% drop at 6 months, but it actually means 46% improvement in their function. So it's not just they're feeling less painful, they're also are functioning more, which makes sense, right? And there's about 37 to 40% drop in their stiffness of the knee. Now, pain and function as well is important. The FDA is expecting you to have both assessments as part of the endpoint for the phase 3 study. So that's an important point, and I'll get back to that in a second. Another thing to look at is the responder rate. So we have more than 80% responders, both at 3 months and 6 months. This is based on specific responding criteria that was determined by the ORC official organization criteria. And based on that, we did that assessment, and you can see 83% at 3 months and 6 months. And the last thing, which is not less important, there were no safety signals or severe adverse events related to Allocetra. So that data for us was really, really exciting for us, and actually for people that KOL that we're working with. Um, but it's an open label, and we're now waiting for the data from the phase 2 study. So, quick update where we are. So, on top of what I just presented to you, we just presented the ORC. ORC is the World Congress of organization for osteoarthritis. We presented actually interim data of all 15 patients, and the data continue to look very, very promising with dramatic and durable pain relief with an improvement of function. And as I said before, these are the same endpoints that we'll use in the phase 3 study. And that's very, very important. Um, what I can say is that sometimes phase 2 endpoints are not identical or similar to the phase 3 endpoints. And sometimes that could lead to different outcomes, right? In this case, we're assessing the same endpoints that we're going to assess in the registry follow-up phase 3 studies. Another thing I want to point out is that although this is the endpoint, right, pain reduction, it's actually a proxy for Allocetra mode of action because we're not a pain relief drug. This is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do with Allocetra is to reduce the inflammation. We're trying to rebalance actually the inflammatory environment of the joint in this case. And we're doing this with an holistic approach because we're kind of using the own patient macrophages to do that, right? We just let them understand where is the right direction in order to reduce that inflammation, and that leads to pain reduction. And so eventually, it's kind of a proxy for our mode of action. Now, because that's not the only one thing we want to assess, we want to understand exactly the matter, to show, demonstrate the mode of action. As I mentioned before, the phase 1/2 study actually includes substantial imaging assessment, MRI, different types of MRIs, and ultrasound at baseline, and MRIs at additional time point 3 months. And in using those tools, we can actually understand the differences in the inflammation in those different patients that we're assessing. So that's something I don't think we talked about a lot until now, but that's a completely part of the package, and it's very, very essential not just to show efficacy, but also to characterize the mode of action of Allocetra. As I said, we've completed the recruitment. I think that was one of the fastest recruitment that I had as a CEO, as a manager, and this, if I may, this I can only compliment the team we have here at Enlivex for executing our operation and our objectives in such a phenomenal way. So we've completed a recruitment of all patients to this double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled phase 2 study. It's a sizable study, as you all understand, it's statistically powered to show significant differences between the active Allocetra group and the placebo group. And if you tie that to the data that are just presented from the phase one study, we're really looking forward to this results. And as I said before, we're targeting to have the top line readout for the 3 months by August and the 6 months top line data readout by November. So just around the corner, as we say, and we are, as I showed, you are looking forward to reviewing the data. In parallel, I can update that we've initiated our preparation for follow-up phase 2b/3 study. It will be a registry study that we're planning to commence in 2026, which is, it's clearly the next step. That study is expected to be conducted in globally, including US and EU. And I think that's this is the major things I wanted to share with you um, in regards to the phase 1/2 study in moderate osteoarthritis. Now, so to summarize, we have basal thumb by the end of this quarter, as mentioned before, the top line data, 3 month data from that study, moderate osteoarthritis, August, and then November, we're going to have the 6 months follow up. Another thing that happened just recently is that we released our 20F. And I think for those of you who reviewed that, or for those of you who have not yet, just, I think that what you can see in that report is that we made a lot of effort, as you all know, to be cost effective and to run our studies while reducing our overall costs. And the as for the end of 24, we had $23.5 million, no debt, still shares outstanding 23.7, still plain vanilla capital structure, and reiterate our estimation, which is that cash runway will be all the way to the end of 26. That has changed. You can see that our overall burn rate was substantially reduced during 24 and continued to drop during 25, which allows us to, again, have a cash runway all the way to the end of 26 and cover all the milestones I just described. To summarize again, season management team. I didn't speak about all our board members and management, but we have a very very seasoned management that really developed drugs all the way from early stage to commercialization. Made a lot of important um, deals throughout their career. Very cost effective, novel therapeutic modality, very strong IP, um, low grade inflammation in a completely different modality and approach, multi billion market size that we're targeting. It's a platform, right? So assuming that we can, the data will be as we expect it to be, that will lead to, I guess, acceleration in the other clinical programs. Very, very important aspect of the drugs that it's simple, it's scalable, it's cost effective, it's off the shelf, completely different from most of the cell therapies that you are familiar with. Favorable safety profile in many patients already, supportive clinical data, and I guess I can stop here and allow you guys to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oren. Please type in your questions. Click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please do not use the raise hand tool, as we will not be taking spoken questions today, but we certainly do want your written in questions. We already have a few here, Oren. I have heard of some companies having success in the canine market for arthritis. Is that an area Enlivex has considered pursuing?
Um, I'm not sure how to answer that question. Currently, we're very focused. Let's put it this way. I think we're waiting for the data, and once we have that readout, we'll be able to expand our, the platform and additional areas.
Thank you, Warren. Are the phase 2 data going to be sufficient to support compassionate use cases if a patient is willing to travel?
Uh, that's a good question. I fully appreciate that someone wants to receive the drug as a compassionate treatment. I think that currently that probably is not something that I can commit to, definitely. And as I said before, I'm not sure where the question is coming from, but the study will be global. We do plan to commence it that next year. So if the patient is suitable for the inclusion exclusion criteria, he could join the next study.
What are the timelines for your additional arthritis trials, such as basal thumb? How many types of arthritis exist?
Okay, so for the first part, as I said, we're now at the stage of the randomized part of the study. We are expecting to receive this data throughout the second half of this year, and that will inform us how to move forward. It will follow an additional phase 2B probably study. So that's more or less the timelines for the basal thumb. In terms of the different types of in different joints that with osteoarthritis, it's endless, like every joint you can think of. But the most common ones are actually the knee, the hip, the hand. Well, there's the basal thumb, but there are other additional joints within your hand that patients suffer from osteoarthritis, and we also have the shoulder. So there are TMJ that I've mentioned. All of them are very relevant, and assuming that we have this promising data coming out from the phase 2 study, as we expect, as I said before, we'll probably be able to accelerate the additional studies. In some cases, the endpoints are very, very similar. So we'll take that approach and discuss that with the agencies.
According to your annual filing issued last week, you made significant cost savings for operations. Do you expect the cost savings to continue throughout this year?
Yes, I think some of them is now only reflecting in 25, and will continue to be very cost effective. I mean, that's clearly something that, considering the market conditions, I think we were very, very successful in making sure that we're spending our money in a careful way and where we need to in order to generate clinical data in an effective way. So the plan is to continue that the same trends in 25.
We're getting a few questions about the sepsis test. One person wants to know, what are the results?
Right. So I'll say it in brief. I mean, we've announced that as well. We did complete the 12 months follow-up. We did see a favorable safety profile. We didn't see anything different than what we saw at the 28 days in terms of the potential effect we saw in the UTI high grade population. That being said, considering the market conditions, considering the cost associated with um, commencing an additional sepsis study, we are looking for external partner that will either work with us or in license to take that into the next level.
Another question, is Big Pharma showing interest in the drug?
So, yes. So we were always, as I said before, I just came back from the one conference. We were always active in presenting this and discussing this with Big Pharma. And that's definitely part of our plan. I mean, we did that as well as I mentioned before. Both Shai Novik, the executive chairman of Enlivex, the co-founder, we collaborate in our previous company named Prolor. We had a long-term interactions with Big Pharma that eventually materialized in 2014 into a co-development and licensing agreement with Pfizer following our successful phase 2 data in that specific indication. So I think that's the same approach we're planning to have here. We're setting the stage for potentially collaboration with, once we get this clinical data. I cannot commit to anything, but we're definitely working on it.
When does the company expect to generate sales or revenue?
So I think we all need to understand that Enlivex is a pharmaceutical company specializing in developing novel drugs. We we'll look for a partner in order to work on, in order to commercialize this drug. That's part of our strategy, whether during the phase two, during the phase three, that's part of what we're planning to do. So that's for the first part. And I think we talked about the collaboration on the second stage. Is there any collaboration on the horizon? So already addressed that.
Could there be a collaboration with other companies in the near future?
Greg, that's why I just addressed. I think we talked about it. You're working on that, and potentially the answer is yes. I cannot commit to anything, but the answer is potentially yes. Yeah.
You filed a 300 million share ATM. If used, this would dilute the shares. Under what circumstance would this be used?
Yeah, so this is really, to be honest, this is really a standard, housekeeping. We want to have that ready. We're not planning. This is just, as we had 100 million before, we didn't use all of it, right? So that's part of our just standard operation to be ready. We're not planning to execute all of it if we don't have to.
With all the different joints that can be affected by arthritis, can it be assumed that if it works in one, it will likely work in all of them?
I think it's a good assumption. I mean, there are differences between some of them. We can split them into weight bearing, for instance, like the hip and the knee, the ankle, and so on. But there are other joints that are a little bit different. But eventually, they do share common features like low-grade inflammation, like the involvement of macrophages. So from that perspective, I definitely think that if we'll hit the knee osteoarthritis data, that will open the door for, first of all, additional joints that we didn't pursue to date, such as the hip, but also will accelerate the additional programs. That's for sure.
Thank you very much, Oren, and thank you to all our participants for their excellent questions. For more information on Enlivex Therapeutics, reach us at 1-800-RED-CHIP or email us at enlv@redchip.com. Please visit the information page created by RedChip for Enlivex. It's enlvinfo.com. There, you can view and download Enlivex's investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on Enlivex. RedChip is excited to announce the launch of RedChat, our advanced AI assistant designed to empower investors with instant, in-depth insights on 4,000 small cap and microcap stocks. Try it now on enlvinfo.com or go to red.chat. Finally, join RedChip's next webinar with Fathom Holdings on Tuesday, May 20th at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Register for all RedChip webinars at redchip.com/events. Thanks again to our many participants today, and thank you, Oren.
Thank you very much, Greg. And thank you for all the participants. Really, really excited. I think that's one of the most exciting webinars for me because truly looking forward to receiving the data. And thank you very much for being with us.